distinguished friends, distinguished guests, distinguished members of the local spiritual assembly of Penang Island. It's indeed my privilege to present to you the title of this talk, Why Baha'i Houses of Worship. In the preparation of this talk, I have spent about 2 months, and I stopped work only this afternoon at 2:30. So I still feel that I haven't finished, but I have no choice because it's time's up. Okay. Now, when I prepared this talk, I asked myself why we should talk about this subject. You want to know about a house of worship, just go to the internet and you can find out everything you need to know. Everything, really, everything is there. So why we need to talk about it? And I realized that maybe it's time we look seriously at the houses of worship. Because since the early 20th century until now, we have already built 9 houses of worship, right? And that's quite a program. And out of these 9, Baha'i community, you should be proud of yourself because you have won so many awards and you have so many visitors and come. You know, you have done so many things. Also, all those excellent effort which you have put into these houses of worship, isn't it time you do something else? Perhaps you should do something else. So I thought this is a good chance to review. And this is basically what it is. A review into the houses of worship. Now, there are 2 aspects. One is, to what extent are the already constructed house of worship mirror forth their requirements as stated in the Baha'i writings? Now, this is important, okay? We don't just simply do something for the sake of something. We do it because there is a requirement for it. And then, how do we assess it? And if that is successful, then where are we going to go from here? Where are we going to go from here? Are we going to keep building or are we going to do something else? Okay. Now, when you look at the founders of the Baha'i faith, which is the twin manifestation, you look at the buildings or the shrine, and they tell you a lot of things. One is you look at the shrine of the Bab, which is located on the mouth of Camel. And straight away, you can think that this building is telling you, it's like a lighthouse, it's like an announcement, right? It's like a trumpet blast. It's telling you of a great message. Just look at the building itself, right? Because it's so prominent, you can see on the slope of a mountain. So it means it has something to tell you, okay? And then you look at the shrine of Baha'u'llah, it's such a modest 2-story bungalow. Such modest 2-story bungalow and located with lots of gardens behind. So these 2 are totally in contrast. And you wonder why. It's because possibly their lives have been different. Their lives' history has been different. And this is the wonder of it. Now these twin manifestations, they come to us for a purpose. They do not come for fun, they come to tell us something. And what is the purpose? What is the effect of their coming on society? Like every religion, they come to bring us laws and principles. And these laws and principles, they tell us, are the means to bring unity amongst men. All right? So when we look at them, we look at the laws and principles. And central to his purpose has been that he would create a global community that will reflect the wonders of mankind. And as unity is the remedy, now is the time we bring religion back to the discussion of human affairs. Now this is a very important concept. Religion has been pushed out of human affairs since the 19th century because of the chaos that happened. The few revolutions pushed religion out. And so far that even today, you talk to people who are deciding economy, social system, they still think that there is not much role for religion. So there's a great task ahead. Okay? So that is the effect that they want to bring. Now, in one of the principles, he tells us, and this is where Baha'u'llah addresses not to us, but to the people of the world, when he's talking about this institution. He tells us, okay, build ye the houses of worship throughout the lands, in the name of Lord of all religion. That's one. Two, make them as perfect as possible. Okay. Three, adorn them not with images and effigies. Okay. Next. Then, with radiance and celebrate their praise, say the praise of God, so that remembrance of eyes is cheered and the heart is filled with light. Okay. So this is basically some of the requirements. Go on. The house of worship is dedicated to the praise of God. It's very easy to remember. The house of worship is a central building and it's a complex. So together with it, you have a number of dependencies, all dedicated for social services. Now, this is considered as one of the most vital institutions of the world. Why? Because it brings together the concept of Baha'i worship and service in the tangible form, which means you can see it, you can recognize it. And at the same time, it gives all these institutions of social service. Okay. And now lastly, the houses of worship must be constructed in every town and village. Okay. Now we go to an important concept. We look at history because we do not live in isolation. We look in history and we find that every great civilization is a new beginning. New beginning. And in that beginning, mankind, because of worship, is actually traveling towards himself and he wants to know more about himself. So the history of temple is actually the innermost biography of man. Right? We look at history, what we have is called the Egyptian temple, the earliest records that we have. In Egyptian temple, all you see is a monument, stone, and a long procession. And along that procession, the phoenix are there. So this is a religious experience for them. It starts with a long procession, walk all the way in the hot sun, with all these statues. You can just imagine they are going to be, it's a preparation for them to be humble, to be ready to meet the Lord. And they go inside that building. All right? So from the outside, we can never see what they do inside. But it is all ordained like that. So this is the experience of the Egyptians. Next. You come to the Greek temple. Something happened. Totally reverse. Something happened. I don't know what happened. But something happened. Because the Greek temples, suddenly all the columns come out. It becomes a perfect structure. It rests on top of the mountain. And it's for you to look at. And it's much more friendly. Much more friendly. So the statue representing whatever God is kept only in the inner. It's kept only in the inner chamber at the back. Okay. So all the design outside now is a mastery of perfection with proportions and so on. So this is the Greek experience. What caused that change from Egyptian to Greek to change the idea? Perhaps you can find some clue because Baha'u'llah spoke about some of the Greek philosophers who journeyed to Hebrew, who journeyed to the land of Hebrew and obtained certain knowledge from there. Okay, next please. Then we have Christ. One of the Emperor Constantine, became the first Christian king, right? And what did he do? Definitely he wanted to have that sense of worship, right? So what did they do? They took one of the basilica and they started to have this concept of a long procession, but it's inside the building now. It's inside the building now. And at the end of it, the most important is the altar, right? Okay, next please. So during the medieval period, As Christians become more and more, they then develop the idea of a crossing, and which is supposed to symbolize the crucifixion of Christ. See? So this is how they experience. They experience a main linear space around which they could move around, and this helps them to understand, to become closer to the life of Christ. Next. Then something happened again in around the period of 1150, when this, although part of Christian churches, something happened where they start to think of building upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards, right? Now, some people say that it's the discovery of construction methods, but then you also can tell that during that time of the world, what was happening in the Middle East. Another messenger of God came, Prophet Muhammad. Okay. So we do not know. Historians cannot be very sure to pinpoint that whether this episode change, a big change of episode is due to that coming. But if you say that this is a biography of man, then we can indirectly infer that that could have done something to this change. Next. Then you come to the Baroque cathedral. Now this is quite strange as well, because suddenly the space inside no longer becomes simple rib and vault. It seems that something is moving. The space becomes much more homogeneous. Now, who is the one who asked them to do something like that? I don't know. It's not shown in the history books. You cannot find. But you find that suddenly they all want to do this kind of thing, right? Things are no more static. Things become fluid. Things become dynamic. So people start to question, all right? And that's why this is a dynamism of this church. Next. This I searched and I found that during the time of Prophet Muhammad, he too had built a mosque. And this was around 622 AD. Next to his house, he had made in the open courtyard. And his concept of mosque is very, very simple: open air building, raised platform for the reading of the Quran. This holy spot was, of course, developed by those kings, rulers who become Muslims. And now the same site is 100 times bigger than the original one. You see the influence of that. Okay. Then, next, something happened. In the 17th century, 16 onwards, the thing happened no longer happen in the churches or in the mosques. Something happened with normal artists. Normal artists, which before was always painting churches, figures of the history of Christ and all these things. Suddenly they start to paint very ordinary things. Very ordinary things. They start to paint landscape. They start to paint moon and the sky. And they start to paint things which is important for us, important for the common people, rather than important for the bureaucratic. Okay? So they help us to start to see a new way of seeing things. And this is the only change. Next. And you have people like Matisse, Picasso. Now Picasso is very important because he helped you to see different viewpoint in one flat piece of painting. You know, before painting was always flat. You see one picture, that's it. See, you see Abdul Baha, that's it. But here they purposely do it in such a way that there's multiple viewpoint in one painting, in one thing flat. So a flat thing, they have tried to make it dynamic. And this is the beauty of this. So they help us to see new things. Next, please. So now we have new things. Baha'i Houses of Worship are new. And so how do we assess them? Okay, next. First point is, see them as a symbol of craftsmanship. Okay, let's go on. Now, one of the names of God is the fashioner. He loves craftsmanship. Therefore, any of his servants who manifests this attribute is acceptable. Now, what does he say? He says, make them as perfect as possible. So it has to be something with craftsmanship. Otherwise, you cannot get that perfection. You know, right? I think you know from your own experience. Next. So craftsmanship involves working together. It's not a one-man show. It involves a lot of cooperation, it involves a lot of consultation. And this is just a group of people who have started to work together, right? And it's not easy to get this group of people to work together, believe me. Next. So I've chosen 3 examples. First example is the one in Wilmette, started in 1920. And the architect did this drawing, he passed away in 1930. See? So you just imagine he passed away, that's it. Normally it's the end of the story, but no, we carry on. So other people got involved in it, developed it. And this building is important because it was the first time they used white cement instead of gray cement, white cement. And they find all kinds of stone and they precast it and to assemble all it into 2 layers of dome. The whole purpose is to let light come in, okay? To let light come in. And this is showing how difficult it is for them to install. Okay, next. Now we come closer to our lifetime, closer to our period, heaven of craftsmanship. Okay, this building, as you all know, and some of you have already visited there, essentially it consists of an inner dome, which has members like what we call entrance leaf, outer leaf, inner leaf, sitting on these 9 arches and with an interior dome. See? So all these elements itself is very complex to make it true. It's very, very complex because there is no simple straight line. Okay, next. So how do they do it? I just show you an example so that at least we have some knowledge about it. Okay, how do they fix this? First, they clean this concrete surface, okay, and apply 3 coats of waterproofing. Next. Then they erect temporary steel formwork for them to walk, to fix it. Then the fixing of the marble happens at the center line. Okay. Now the reason they do this is that the loading when the marble goes into the concrete becomes symmetrical. So your leaf do not just kaput like that. Okay. Next. And the first outer leaf took 2.5 months to complete. Right? Just one outer leaf, 2.5 months to complete. Next. So how do they fix it? It was the carpenters who did it. It was a carpenter, it wasn't the architect or wasn't anyone else. Believe me, it was the carpenter. Okay? So what they do, they start to drill holes. They try to drill holes into the concrete. But you know, inside the concrete, you have reinforcement, and these reinforcements are galvanized. So you don't want your drilling to pierce the galvanized the steel reinforcement. Okay? So each piece of marble that was once slotted into steel, and they maintain an air gap of 40 mm from the surface of the concrete. Okay, next. So next they had to clean the slot, align the marble in place, and put a constant 10 mm thickness so that the whole line of the pattern you can see on the outside. Okay, next. After they have fixed the brackets, in order to make sure that one marble is in line with the next marble, they have to put a wooden curvature template. All right? And to make sure that there is no gap. If anything is more than 3 mm gap, oh dear, they have to adjust again. Okay, next. So this shows that after they finish all these things, this is the result. This is the result of it. Next. Now the third example I look at is the one in Chile, the Chile temple. Often they call it the Embodied Light. I just want to explain briefly to you what it means. Okay. Go back to it. Okay. What it means is this. On the outside surface is all glass. Okay. It's a kind of glass. So as you know, glass light come into it. But on the inner surface is very thin layer of marble. Thin layer of marble. So you don't see the heat. And this thin layer of marble, because of the strong light coming in, it starts to glow. Okay. So this is the meaning that light is embodied into the structure. All right. Okay. So this itself is going to open in October next year. Okay. Next. So conclusion. When we do building, when we try to follow Baha'u'llah teachings to become a civil of craftsmanship, I think it's successful in that term. But at what cost? Okay, at what cost? There's a huge maintenance cost involved in this. But on the other hand, maybe maintenance is not the main issue. If you look at all the religious building, maintenance, so what? This is subsidiary compared to building to the overall cost. Okay. Next. Okay. Next. Okay. The next item I assess is the house of worship as a symbol of local culture. Baha'u'llah tells us that build houses of worship everywhere. Now, when you build houses of worship in every land, what are you going to do? Are you going to duplicate the design of this house of worship in the next house because it's so easy to duplicate? Or are you going to say, no, each culture, the people are different, they want it differently, so please don't duplicate. Please do everyone single, special. Right? So, next. So we look at how this temple is a symbol of local culture. And recently, you know that 2014, I don't know if you have not known, this has been submitted to UNESCO for category under outstanding cultural category. And the three criteria are: one is symbolic, is sculptural yet heroic structural. Criteria 4 is a unifying link in the land of religions, right? And criteria 5 expresses the principle of oneness of God, oneness of religion, and oneness of mankind. Okay, so it's still being assessed, but it's good to know that it's been submitted, right? Next. Now, if you look at this Panama temple, they also uses things which will reflect of the local culture. They use these stones, all right, these stones, and the pattern that they use is based on this Native American fabric design. So every house of worship tries in one way or another to do that. Next. Poetic vision of light. Now, how does this reflect the local culture? It's a bit too early to assess this, a bit too early. But when you look at the mountains, you look at the hills and so on, maybe in the future we'll be able to assess it. Next. You look at the latest one, the Baha'i House of Worship, local house of worship in Battambang. Now, this one is very interesting as well because Cambodia, if you ask them the temples everywhere you see must have roof. No roof, no temple. Must have roof. They are associated with that. This is the way Buddhism has come to that part of the world. So the architect there has done this design, and it's the local house of worship, very small, can seat only about 2 to 300 people. See? And what is impressive is that local people there local youths there start to take a hand of it, and perhaps in years to come, we can see how this has become a symbol of local culture. Okay? So to be a local culture, it takes time. It takes time. It's a test of time. All right? Test of time. Okay? Next. Okay. These are houses of worship in their context. I thought you should look at the context because all is either in the surrounding gardens. Only these two is near towns. A big township here and a township nearby. Okay, next. The third item is Baha'i House of Worship as a symbol of unity. Okay. Now we know from the writings that the purpose of temple and houses of worship is that of unity. And what is unity? Places of meeting where different people, races can come together. Right? Next. So how do we assess that? We look at the visitors. Very simple this one. Look at the visitors. And we know that for this Indian temple, over the last 25 years, 100 million visitors have come. Okay? So as a symbol of unity, I think a lot of people come. Right? And these other temples a bit far away from town, they also have a vast number of visitors. Okay, next. Same as well in Western country, in the Frankfurt temple, the temple location is actually quite a distance away from Frankfurt. You have to go by bus. And yet, you still see that a number of visitors are there whenever they have a function. Next. So conclusion is that if it is successful as symbol of unity, that means that people will actually go and visit the house of worship. But the thing is, in different society, they have different response to these houses of worship. Maybe in India, everybody wants to go to a house of worship. Western country, maybe their response itself is not that warm. Okay. Next. Okay, now the houses of worship, temple as houses of worship. Okay. Now, if it is to be successful, the central prayer hall is the most important one, where friends get all together and listen to the prayer. Now, why there is no images and effigies inside? Now, this is important because a lot of people who goes to Baha'i House of Worship, especially in India, first round they go in, they see there is nothing, and they have to keep quiet. Okay, then they sit around very quickly, they will leave. Second round, this same guy would come back because I've met them before. They'll come back, and then they'll sit longer. They're wondering why there is nothing. The third round, they'll come back, and they'll even sit longer. And this time, you find that they have gone to the hall downstairs and get a prayer book. See? So this is important because we are directing them towards the journey towards yourself. Okay. So journey towards yourself, talking about prayer. Prayer, as we know, when we pray, a feeling fills our heart. All right? So our heart must be sensitive to the music of prayer. So this is an experience. Sometimes we pray and we are not sensitive to that music of prayer. Therefore, we finish. Right? But this is not what Baha'u'llah wants us to experience. He wants to experience and recognize this language of the prayer. Next. Prayer in session. Choir, distinguished guests of different religions coming together and listening. Prayer in the evening. Next. This is the house of worship in Western Samoa. And here, Baha'u'llah tells us to go to temple at the hour of dawn and enter yourself and sit in silence and listen to the verses of God. Just listen. Next. Now this house of worship is very important because it's really the first house of worship that you find the symbols of different religion on the pillars. Now, I don't think you can do this in Malaysia because there will be a lot of people asking why you use my religious symbol on yours. But in a place like America, it's fine. It's fine. You know, the people are so open that they actually accept it, right? And this is why we say that what Baha'u'llah say, consult the followers of all religions. Therefore, this is the only house of worship which use the emblems of all the religion, right? And people to come. Next, please. So sometimes, in order for them to reach beyond their normal form of worship, they have to understand that all the teachings of God come from one. All right? That the prophets of God, essence of prophets of God and one, there's no distinction among them. They have only one secret, and their secret is the same secret. So when they understand this, then they will feel free to listen to the verses of God inside the temple. Next. This one is at Sydney. Okay, it's at Sydney, and here we are telling people that the measure of each revelation is distinctive bearer of a distinctive message, and each one has specific acts to do. Next. Okay. So this message is then relevant to the circumstances of the age in which it appeared. Next. Now, devotions in the houses of worship are brief. They are very brief. They have a reading of program and text, and they are chanted without sermons or commentary. So now I like us to experience, imagine that you are in the house of worship, and we are going to hear a unity prayer. And I'd like to invite one of the Baha'is here to say a unity prayer.
Yes. God, grant that the light of unity may envelop the whole earth, and that the seal, the kingdom is God's, may be stamped upon the brow of all its peoples. God, grant that the light of unity may envelop the whole earth, and that the seal, the kingdom is God's, may be stamped upon the brow of all its peoples.
Next. So in conclusion, as a place of worship, I think all the Baha'i houses of worship are very successful. They are very successful as a place of worship. As long as, and they keep having events which will attract the public and attract people to come and experience. Next. Now, the last assessment. The Baha'i House of India Mashriqu'l-Adhkár as a symbol of service to humanity. Right. The writing tells us that next to the central building, we must have all these institutions. There are 5 of them, right? Next. And the first one to actually do this is the one in Ashgabat, 1908. And in this house of worship, it was during the time of the Russians that you had a Baha'i community about 1,000 believers. Right? And what 1,000 believers start to do? They start to develop. Next. They start to develop a school, a hostel for travelers, a hospital, and a building for groundkeepers between the gardens of the house of worship. With 1,000 believers and their friends, they started to do this. Okay? So this is the first house of worship which is truly completed what the writings requested for. First and only house of worship completed. Unfortunately, there was an earthquake and all this is gone. Okay. Next. So when we talk about worship and service, these are 2 inseparable aspects of life. Okay. And it's important because one is gathering for prayer, another is building capacity for service to humanity. Next. So in concluding this aspect of it, we are just at the beginning for this aspect of it. And we should realize this. These are the beginning. In the beginning, what needs to be done, just as when they did the central house of worship, they had all this team of architects and engineers and kept together and do all this work. Now you have a group of people committed to the vision of unity. They get together to do programs of social growth. They develop a systematic culture and they find opportunities to service. And this is the beginning. Right? So we come to now the end, which is the shrine of Ba. Here, where are we? We are the beginning of the mankind collective coming of age. Right? And in this mankind collective coming of age, the biggest experience and the most immediate experience facing us is to experience one common faith. Is to get people in society to experience one common faith. With that, a lot of things can be resolved. Next. Baha'u'llah tells us again that what is the meaning of temples? They are symbols of divine uniting force, that the people will realize that the law of God has been to unite them. So now, what can we do? We have come to the end of our analysis, and as he says, we have to be consciously concerned with the needs and age in which we live in. So a question we need to ask ourselves every time is, what can we do? Next. The end.